Growing up in rural Michigan, I had several what the heck was that experiences. Most were minor, a moving shadow or an uneasy feeling, but one stands out. I was 8 to 10 years old in the mid-80s, and my family had just returned from a vacation. When we got out of the car, my dad headed to the mailbox, my mom to her garden, and I lugged my suitcase inside the house. All of the windows were shut, and I pulled the garage door closed behind me. Walking through the house, I passed a bay window, from which I could see my dad still on the road, and my mom picking some vegetables. The house was silent, except for my footsteps on the carpet. I walked into my room and put my suitcase down in the corner. I heard a male voice laughing behind me, maybe in the doorway 8 feet away. It was a hearty laugh, loud and clear. I spun around, and there wasn't anyone in the doorway. I ran back to the garage, through the door, and outside. My father was just grabbing his suitcase from the car, and my mother was pulling weeds. I wasn't scared when I heard the voice, but not having a tangible body to put it with did unnerve me a bit. Following the event, I was able to forget and had no issues in the rest of the house. It was only after I got older and interested in the paranormal did I realize that I must have had a run-in with something. About 2 years ago, I bought a 126-year-old, 8,000 square foot mansion in Missouri, just outside of Kansas City where I grew up. My mother had owned and lived in the house for the previous 15 years, slowly maintaining it. She had done a great job maintaining its mid-1800s character, slowly bringing the woodwork back to life, adding insulation, and replacing all of the plumbing and wiring. I mention this because I've heard that a disturbance in the environment can cause spectral activity to begin. I'd seen the house only once, as I live over 2,000 miles away, but I fell in love with it immediately. The first night I stayed over, I woke in the middle of the night to huge blobs, about a dozen, from golf ball to basketball size, floating around the room I was sleeping in. This is the one and only time I've ever experienced anything like that. I closed my eyes, said a prayer, and fell back to sleep in time. I said nothing to my mother the next day until she asked me, "Well, did you see the blobs?" One of the workers stayed down there the other night and said he wouldn't stay in the house after dark because of the blobs floating around him. She had not seen them, and still hasn't. However, the previous owner told my mother a few years later that he loved what she had done to the front room, but he could never stay in there while the house was his because of the blobs. During the summer of 2007, I went back to see my family. I stayed downstairs again and had several things happen. It is important to note that I've never felt in danger, only uncomfortable. My mom and her boyfriend went upstairs to go to bed. I stayed downstairs in the first floor master suite. For the next 45 minutes, the heavy footsteps above my head were attributed to the two of them settling in for the night. Finally, I decided I would go up and find out what was going on. The entire upstairs was dark and still. They were both long in bed. I returned to my bedroom to hear the continued walking above me. So, I went out on the living room to sleep on the couch. The walking continued above me, although there is only one attic above that living room. I could also hear a distant, quiet talk between a man and a woman, but I couldn't make out what they were saying, and it seemed to always be somewhere else from where I was. The next morning, I decided maybe I would have a chat with myself out loud, and if anyone else heard it, then maybe it would be for the better. I sat on the end of the bed. It was now daylight, so I felt comfortable to be in the bedroom again, and said that I was the new owner and the son of the woman they probably knew very well by now. I really liked the house and hoped to continue my mother's good work, but for now, I lived elsewhere. I also mentioned something that I don't suggest, but in this situation, I felt comfortable in doing so. I told them that they seemed to have been there a long time, and so long as they agreed to stay out of the bathroom while I was in there, we could get along just fine together. The following night was as quiet as it could be. I think their interest in me was satisfied. This past summer, 2008, was my third visit back. Absolutely nothing happened. I was ready, and nothing. Hey, that's fine with me. But one side note, my mother sat down to look at an album she had kept for all these years she had been doing the refurbishing. She was showing me the huge change in the house, from walls being ripped out and then rebuilt, and so on. In well over half of the pictures, there were huge light anomalies. There were smears, blobs, and strange twists of the image. I mentioned this to my mother, who looked right at me and said, "You know, I haven't taken a decent picture since I've lived in this house. I've owned one crappy camera after another. All the pictures look like this. I have to throw most of them away because they are no good." I just smiled. Right, Mom. Every digital and disposable camera she has ever had in the past 15 years has had the same problem. I grew up with a mom who's wicked, and she's very psychic. She has told me accurately if a lover and I will break up, when, if I'll meet someone new, and accurate descriptions of people I'll meet. My mother told my roommate that the child she was having would be a girl, and she was correct. My mom, to my amazement, is the real deal. On Halloween, our house is the most popular because the altar my mother sets up outside is very real. It's very fun, and I grew up with an easygoing view of the paranormal. I do tend to be very logical, and I believe in a paranormal experience if it does not seem like someone is BSing me. I keep my mind open. My mother does have headaches if she is around haunted houses. She has migraines that will make her sick for days after being in one. She's had this happen to her several times in her life, including once when I was a kid. A few years ago, when I was 23, I started having heart palpitations and tachycardia. At one point, my heart rate went up to 181. I spent night after night in the emergency room, and I was recommended to a cardiologist. I went through that for several months before finally someone realized it was a sedative that I took that helped me sleep. The doctors took me off the sleep medication, and I soon found out that I'd become dependent on sleep aids. At the same time, I had to get on a Greyhound bus for a 2-day trip to move back with my parents because of the health problems. If you've ever traveled on a Greyhound, you know it's really hard to sleep on it. I was sleep deprived. I was told that I was sleeping, but I didn't realize it. I wasn't sleeping through the night. I was exhausted. I was depressed, and I developed a phobia of the sound of a beating heart medication commercials, etc. In short, my mental health was suffering. I had to make the choice to go into a psychiatric ward because it took a month to get an appointment with a psychiatrist. I didn't want to wait that long. The ward was in a regular city hospital. All the patients were quiet and were there to heal. Nobody was dangerous. There were patients with bipolar and other types of mental illness, and nobody was dangerous. There are different levels of hospitals. This was a ward for anybody going through emotional difficulties. I started to sleep the first 2 days I was there. I was not dangerous, but they did have to give me something to sleep. I was having dreams in which in my bathroom, patients had bathrooms in their rooms. I could hear a woman crying and throwing up all night. It was horrible and nightmarish. I could never see her because in the dream, I was laying in bed. How can I describe this? Even though I was asleep and dreaming, it felt like I was aware of everything going on. It never sounded quiet. It sounded like patients were throwing fits, and that someone would go by my room and rap on the wall with a walker, and that poor woman threw up and cried. She sounded miserable. The ward was actually always quiet. Nobody threw fits at night. My mom had taught me how to interpret dreams. I figured mine showed my anxieties. I'd been through hell. I wanted to sleep, and I never gave one thought to the idea that the place was haunted or had residual hauntings. I had greater concerns at the time. However, my mom came to pick me up, and she refused to enter the ward. I didn't think anything of that either. We were driving home, and she asked me how I had slept, and if I did at all. I told her about the nightmares, and how I was completely loud, and I was still very exhausted. My mother was shocked, and it showed on her face. She said, "Sarah, those were not just dreams. This psychiatric ward used to be a cancer ward." I was getting a migraine because there are patients who have not moved on. Wow, that shocked me. I never heard doctors mention that it had been a cancer ward. The idea was never put into my head. Like I said, I wanted to sleep again and to feel happy. I was concerned for my health. I believe my mom. She's usually incredibly accurate about these kinds of things. I honestly have gotten tired of finding out if me and a potential lover are not going to work out. She's that accurate. However, I could not tell you if that ward was the former cancer ward. I simply don't know because none of the doctors ever mentioned it. I was sleep deprived and going through hell at the time. My emotional state could have been reflected in my dreams. However, if I've learned anything about the paranormal, is that it can be a very small world. The hospital in question is in Iowa. It is a regular city hospital with an emergency room, surgery room, etc. It is not a psychiatric hospital only. If a former nurse ever writes you, or even a former patient, I'm here to tell you that there may have been something to their experience. The ward in question is still open. This was a few years ago that I was there. This is just a quirky experience that I wanted to share. My story has been going on for a couple of years now. When I was 9, we moved into our house. It's a nice little place, backed by a large ditch. Behind the ditch is a large forest that I used to play in. The house itself is unremarkable. It's 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom is the first room you come to when you open the front door, straight in. To the right, there's a door to the garage, and to the left is the room we use as our living room. To the right of that is the dining room, with an entry into the kitchen. From the left of the living room is the hallway, with the bedrooms and the bathroom. From the time when I first moved in, I've never liked the bedroom at the end of the hall. It has a window that looks out into the front yard. The room I shared with my sister has a window that looks out into the backyard. I'm not sure what it is about the room, but it's a creepy feeling. I was around 11 when my older sister moved out. By that time, it had been a while since I'd gotten any creepy feelings in the second bedroom. I was pleased with the idea of having my own room. I moved my bed in there, got everything set up, and prepared for the grown-up life that I wanted. The first couple days were okay. I had strange nightmares about something coming in from the ditch, something I couldn't explain. Finally, after about a month after I'd been sleeping in the room, I woke up suddenly from one of those dreams. I laid there for a while, not really sure of what woke me up. Then, I realized that the music box my grandma had given me a year ago, it was on. The music box was shaped like a carousel horse and had a switch on the bottom of it that turned the music on. I sat up and took it down from the shelf above my head and turned the switch off. I figured that maybe my cat went up on the shelf and brushed against it. I laid back down to go to sleep. It was lying there that I first saw him. I don't know what made me look up into the doorway of my bedroom. At the time, I slept with the door open, but I did, and standing there was a man, clear as day. For a moment, I was sure that someone must have broken into the house. With the light coming off the nightlight near the door, I saw that his mouth was moving quickly, and no sound was coming out. It was almost like he was screaming at me. He took a step forward and vanished. I slept in the living room that night. I finally got the nerve to sleep in my room again, after about a week of sleeping on the sofa. And that night, I had the same creepy nightmares and woke up to find a child's shape sitting on the end of my bed, staring at me. It vanished when I turned the light on. I ended up spending the next year sleeping on the floor in my sister's room because my mom wouldn't let me move my stuff in with her. I also couldn't change my room without getting the feeling of being watched. I would glance at the mirror. It's the type that sits on the dresser, and see a face staring at me, one that wasn't my own. My older sister finally moved back home, and I ended up back in the other bedroom with my sister. I thought that would make it go away, but I would sometimes see the man standing in the doorway late at night. He'd stand there staring at me, mouth moving, forming words I didn't understand. 3 years ago, some major changes happened. My oldest sister broke up with her husband, lost her house, and had to move in with my mom and dad, along with her 2 kids. My youngest oldest sister had her boyfriend living in the house with her. The living arrangements were this: my two oldest sisters slept in one room, along with my youngest nephew, belonging to the first sister I talked about. My oldest sister's kids slept in the second bedroom with me, and my sister and her boyfriend had the living room. It was weird at first, but we all got used to it. The weird things had calmed down since I'd moved to the other bedroom, but it picked up again when my sister moved in. I was trying to get some sleep. It was around 1 in the morning, and I saw the child's shape again, but this time it was sitting at the end of my niece's bed. I sat up, but before I could say anything, my niece woke up screaming. She said it was a nightmare, and I had a feeling it was probably the same one I had when I was younger. They moved out last year, and things calmed down for the most part, until my youngest oldest sister moved away. I now had a bedroom all to myself. I was trying once again to get some sleep. I've always had trouble sleeping in this house, and I looked at my doorway, and the man was standing there, but this time I could hear him whispering. It was gibberish. I turned over and pulled the pillow over my head, but the room got so cold, I ended up turning my TV on and closing my bedroom door. Another time, I was messing around with a couple of the other teenagers in the area. We were crossing the ditch and going over to the woods behind the houses. The way we cross is there's an area with 2 large pipes that stick out in the water. Surrounding the pipes are these rocky things that you can slide down, but also grip with your hands. They're kind of smooth and hard to hold when wet. We were coming back. The others had crossed just fine. I was the last one over. The first thing that happened that was really odd was my hand slipped and I started sliding down. I felt as if someone had grabbed my arm and stopped me before I reached the water. I was about to step down into the water to get across when I heard someone yell my name and say very loudly in my ear to stop. I looked down and there was a snake in the water, right where I was about to put my foot. My friend came back across and got rid of the snake. I got home okay. When I went to take a shower later that night, I looked at my arm, and I had a hard handprint bruise on my arm. I don't know if it was one of the ghosts from the house, but something stopped me from falling and from getting bitten by the snake. So, I guess even if the ghosts scare me, they're looking out for me too. Hey guys, so first of all, I'm going to say this again because it really needs to be said, and I really want you guys to know that I really appreciate your viewership, but also to actually share the video as best as you can. Everywhere around social media, anywhere you can. It really helps more than you know, and the algorithm is always a friend of mine when the videos get shared and it gets recommended, and more people can be a part of the Phantom Wagon, the darkness, whatever you want to call it. So guys, I appreciate it in advance for you sharing this video, for you leaving a like, and let me know in the comment section below which stories you like the most. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I'm not feeling the best right now. I'm kind of ill, but I really wanted to do this video because I was really passionate about making these stories for you guys. These were some really great, exciting stories. Which story did you like the most? I did ask you that a second ago, but I really want to know because I read some great stories. As for me, I really like the last story the most because it had like a bit of everything in it. had a really traditional ghost haunting. So guys, with that, I'm gonna leave you guys alone and just, you know, be as good as you can be, whatever that means. But guys, I love you, and I'll see you in the next video. I gotta go. Love you, and good night or good morning or whatever time you're watching this at. Yeah, I kind of messed up there, but that's okay.